let's talk about, first of all, what is North County? So geographically, what are we talking about? And you can see here we split the region into kind of four what we'll call sub-regions. North Coast, which really represents all the way up to Camp Pendleton, down to kind of Encinitas is kind of split in the middle there. And then what we call the North Central Coast really goes from Encinitas all the way down to the 56, kind of Del Mar, Solana Beach, that area. Central Inland, really again, think about that 56 freeway and how that goes along. It includes Poway, Ramona, Julian. And then North Inland includes San Marcos, Escondido, Fallbrook, kind of all the way out to the San Diego County border. So geographically, that's what we're talking about. Now, economically, what is North County, right? It's actually, it would be the 42nd largest state in terms of people. We have 1.2 million residents, so a little over a third of San Diego County's population. In terms of economic output, we would actually have gross regional product that would make us the 40th most powerful state. We are larger than, we produce more, we have more economic output than 10 states. And really, we'll spend a lot of time today, we'll talk about really why is that? What are the key kind of what I'm going to call the industry clusters? Biotechnology and biomedical devices, clean technology, sports and active lifestyle, these key kind of export-oriented clusters that really drive economic activity in our region. So, what are the key questions? What are we going to talk about today? We want to look at, the nice thing, in being the third year, we can look at some indicators that we've kind of introduced over the last 2 years and really look at how they've changed and how our region is changing. So look at those kind of economic indicators and what are we learning from them? Again, we want to talk about our industry clusters, how they're changing in our region. I'll actually introduce the idea to you of both maybe a potential new industry cluster that we need to add that the data is showing us. And really, how are these new technologies, how are they going to impact what our region looks like? And then lastly, we want to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities facing North County's economy. Supervisor Roberts talked about the issue of water and energy and some of that. And we'll spend a little time today, not a lot, but a little time talking about those issues and the impact that can have both in our quality of life, but also on some of the economic vitality in North County. Okay, so let's start with employment. And interestingly enough, so we talked last year, North County was hit harder by the recession than the rest of San Diego County in terms of employment. We were hit a little further behind, but we ended actually losing more jobs than the rest of San Diego County. And you can see that, in that blue line that was underneath kind of the green line. So that light blue is North County. The green line is the rest of San Diego County. And just this year, though, we've actually picked up more jobs than the rest of San Diego County between 2007 and 2015. So our job growth for the first time has outpaced the rest of San Diego County, and we've actually recovered stronger from the recession by just by a very small percentage. But I think one of the other themes, and I think this is important that we look at, in the last 3 years, so 36 months, not in the last year, but in the last 3 years, we've gone from an unemployment rate in North County that was about 7.8% to an unemployment rate that's 4.4%. So that's good, right? People are finding jobs. There's a lot of opportunities. That is good. But we also, one of the issues we need to talk about, what does that mean in terms of the available workforce and the ability to find and hire new people? We're actually below 5%. And 5% are kind of one of those magic numbers that we've kind of hit. That's about all the unemployment we have. If you're 5%, that's kind of what we consider natural unemployment. People that are moving, kind of frictional employment, moving from one job to the next. Our labor market has basically gone from, we had a lot of people looking for work to not a lot really looking, particularly when we start looking at specific industries. Some of the professional and scientific and technical consulting, they're having a harder time finding the people they need. So that talent work pipeline is particularly important. Remember our geographic regions. So North Coast, North Central Coast, and Central Inland have all seen considerable job growth since 2007. The North Inland Escondido, Fallbrook, that area, is still below its 2007 numbers in terms of employment. And this is somewhat emblematic of what we're seeing in the country as a whole, right? Places like San Jose, that Mark was just talking about, are seeing, strong job growth. Some of these urban centers with strong, industry clusters have seen considerable job growth. But even in our own region, in our own, North County, we're seeing some areas that still have not recovered and still aren't back to their employment levels that they were at in 2007 or even, pre-recession. Whereas North Central Coast, where we are right now, has actually seen growth above 6% in employment over the last 8 years, which is pretty strong. We like looking at occupations, right? What's the world of work doing? And one of the things that we've talked about the last 2 years is this idea of occupational tiers, right? Tier 1 jobs are your professional positions. They typically require at least a 4-year degree. These are positions that their average pay is about $100,000. Right? Tier 2 are your middle skill, middle wage jobs. One of the bigger larger pictures in 30 years ago, 80% of our jobs were tier 2. Today it's about 40%. One of the big issues that we have is that those middle skill, middle wage jobs just don't exist like they do. And part of that is because those jobs have been offshored, but probably a larger explanatory factor is automation, is computerization, is technology. Tier 3 are your lower skill, lower wage positions. These are in food service, retail, cleaning, and these typically require a high school degree or less and only pay about $28,000, $29,000. Okay, so why is that important? So this is your one quiz for the day. Over the last 3 years, or no, let's say over the last 7 years, what's the occupation has lost the most? Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3? So how many people say Tier 1 jobs we've lost the most in the last 6 years? Okay, well, how many people think we lost Tier 2 jobs in the last 6 years? This is a group, you've heard my presentation before, you're cheating, yes. And then Tier 3 jobs, but one of the important things, one of the important ratios we look at is what is the ratio of job growth between Tier 1 and Tier 3? Right? That's important because those Tier 1 jobs, a job is not just a job, right? There's employment multipliers from these, but also in terms of sustainability and the ability to live and really drive that quality of life. Tier 1 and Tier 2 jobs are sustainable. Tier 3 jobs generally aren't. Tier 3 jobs generally require some sort of public assistance to live in the area, so they're not as sustainable. So we can see here that over the last year, so one of the good positive stories about North County is our Tier 1 jobs have grown faster than our Tier 3 jobs, and that is not always the case. I've done this type of research in San Jose, in Santa Barbara, throughout California, or even doing some of it nationally, and that's not always the case. A lot of times Tier 3 jobs are growing faster than Tier 1, and we're not seeing that. One of the things that the research really shows, and another theme, is we are really transitioning. North County is transitioning from really a population-serving economy that's really focused on providing jobs to serve the people that live here to one that's much more export-oriented, developing products and skills that really we can go sell out to a larger market, which is a very positive thing. And one of the reflectors, one of the indicators of that is our growth in Tier 1 jobs, because Tier 1 jobs tend to be engineers and architects and computer software developers and people that are developing and designing new products that we can sell to a larger market than just our community. And you can see also that Tier 1 and Tier 3 jobs have both grown considerably from 2007. I mean, if you look at the chart, Tier 1 jobs saw a little drop between 2008 and 2009, kind of the biggest impact of the recession, but have pretty much been growing since then. And even, Tier 3 jobs have been growing over the last few years, where Tier 2 jobs are still below their 2007 number. And to be honest, I don't expect that to change a lot. One of the exciting things, and so I'm cheating here a little bit, our firm, and I want to thank the people at BW, we've started to spend a lot of time looking at occupational vulnerability. What does that mean? Okay. There's been a lot of talk and there's a lot of discussions about jobs that are disappearing, that are being automated, that are being replaced by software, that are, Keynes, a famous economist, talked about this idea of churn, right, and jobs being replaced by technology. And so there's been some great research, a study, if any of you are data nerds like me, Frey and Osborne did a study, they're Oxford economists, and they did two things that were really cool. They looked at this idea of technical automation and jobs changing, but for like us, who spends a lot of time looking at things like SOC and NAICS codes, they took all the SOC codes and they basically assigned a probability that that job would be kind of technologically replaced by a software or a robot or some sort of automation, and kind of looked at jobs and say, okay, how vulnerable are they to this? And one of the things that we found in doing this analysis is that North County's kind of occupational profile is following the national average. About 47% of our jobs are vulnerable to this kind of technological automation. That sounds horrible, right? 45%, that's really bad. Economists, we're not a fun bunch, right? We do a good job of looking at negatives, the things that are going away. We don't do a very good job of thinking of the growth and the opportunity. So what I will say is there are going to be job growth, right? We just don't model that very well, right? It's much harder to model. But modeling the jobs that we think are disappear, that's a lot easier, so we're going to focus on that discussion. So that being said, I don't think all jobs are going to go away. I think one of the things, and there's implications for education like that, but one of the things that is important is if the national average is about 47%, North County's right at that average. Riverside County is 53, 54%. Your industry profile, the industry clusters that you have are again become important because they are much likely to have jobs that are not going to be automated. So if the national average is 47%, one of our key clusters, ICT, Information, Communication, and Technologies, only 21% of their occupations are really vulnerable. 4 out of 5 of their positions are likely to be there and they're likely to grow. So that's something that's important. Healthcare, clean technology, these are things that have a much lower portion of their jobs that are going to be automated. Or I shouldn't say automated, or they're likely to be outdated and go away. So these are another reason why we think your industry cluster profile is important and something that you need to track, because they tend to have not only higher paying jobs, they tend to not only have higher employment multipliers, they tend to be in industries where jobs are not likely to be automated in the future or not likely to disappear. One of the challenges is things like connected tourism and agriculture, which is one of our our largest employers, does have 70% of those jobs are vulnerable, according to that study and some of our analysis in it. But this is why our industry cluster are important. They're a way of segmenting their economy, but they're also an important way of engaging with employers. Employers don't talk about, I'm in manufacturing. They say, I develop biomedical devices, or I'm producing, new surfboards or new cameras. So it's a way of connecting with their employers that they see and understand. But I think for the educational community, it's also a way of looking and developing skills, right? And so that's exactly what we need to start thinking about as educators. How are we teaching people how to tell a story? And how are we giving the technology and the devices to do that? Right? And so that's exactly what, if we look at industry clusters and connect our career pathways with it, allows us to develop those foundational skills that are in context with the technologies that we're looking at. So our industry clusters account for about 34% of all our jobs in North County, but they take a much larger portion of those tier 1 jobs and really some of those employment multipliers. They end up hiring more people because of the growth and the size of the wages that come with those jobs. So what am I talking about real quickly? Biotechnology, I think the group's pretty familiar with. Biotechnology, biomedical devices. Now, clean technology, I think that's one that tend to people, oh, that's solar companies. Yes, not really. What a lot of the clean technology is it's industrial design services. It's a lot of the semiconductors that are developing new, mobile technologies and things like that. So the clean technology tends to be kind of a key kind of cluster that drives a lot of the new products and the new devices that are being used to use less energy, but also to be able to do things more efficiently. And you see like a lot of semiconductor in that space. ICT we talked about, that's kind of a broader, newer information technology. It includes video gaming, it includes cyber, it also includes the Viasats and the telecommunication firms of the world. Sports and active lifestyle manufacturing, we're all familiar with GoPro and the surfboards and all, Callaway. Connected tourism and agriculture, and that's kind of one of our bigger employers in terms of size. Healthcare and building and design. We looked at jobs, so the vertical axis really shows the average wages. And most of our industry clusters pay well above the regional average. ICT, biotechnology and medical devices, clean technology, building and design, all of them pay well above the regional average. And all of them, except for ICT, have really grown in the last 5 years. Now, I will say biotechnology and biomedical devices dropped a little bit from last year. And most of that is really connected to testing laboratories. We've seen a drop in testing laboratories. We expect that employment to pick back up, but it will be probably at a slower trajectory that it's been in the past. Clean technologies and building and design has really building design has really recovered in the last 5 years, and clean technology has been our small but really kind of steady grower over the last 5 to 6 years. But clean technology, I think, is an important one. This is one that's grown, by 25% over the last 5 years, and provides average wages of $85,000. And remember, this is not just kind of solar firms and like that. These are firms that are developing new products, industrial design services, some of the environmental consulting that's in there. And to be honest, it closely connects to one of the issues. We spend a little time in the report talking about the relationship between energy and water. And one of the interesting things that you can see is there's been an increased dependence kind of on new sources, from outside of our region, or in the case of desalination, new technologies. The problem is whether we're importing water or we're desalinating water, it's very energy intensive, right? And so the water kind of purview or relationship with energy is strong, and it's one we need to be aware of. We can also look at on the supply side. In 2014, a very dry year, hydroelectric power in California produced 6% of our water. The year before, when we had more water, it accounted for 12%. I mean, it doubled really in 1 year just by water supply. So one of the things we need to start thinking about, and clean technology firms are doing a good job, is starting to understand, okay, how do we take this challenge? And it will be a challenge that California is facing. Even in an El Nino year, we're still not seeing the kind of the supply we need. Water and local energy sources are going to become more and more important and more linked in the future. And our increased population, economic activity, and the changes in the climate are all impacting this supply. So what are some of the kind of innovative ways we're dealing with it? And desal is one of them. We're going to have to look at other areas. Innovation is something that we try to track. And so one way of tracking innovations is we look at patents and we look at patent activity. And as, like similar to the story last year, North County has 40% of, so San Diego County is the #2 county in the country right now for patent activity. Now, they haven't updated, we're still at 2013, they haven't put out the 2014 numbers, which is a little frustrating, but you've seen San Diego County, the only county that produces more patents than San Diego County. Anybody know that? Gold star for the day? Santa Clara County, I heard somebody say it back there. Yes, Silicon Valley, that's the one place. And so in the #2 patent creating county in the country, 40% of patents are done by inventors that live in North County. Right, we have the scientists now. We have a much smaller portion. The right line is where the companies are. Most of the companies are just south. They're in Sereno Valley, which is just south of our North County border. But we are an important part of that innovation regime. Let's talk a little bit about people in place, and there's going to be a good discussion about quality of life, and I love the quality of life discussion, particularly in the context of economic development, because too often quality of life becomes this very kind of amorphous. We all want to live in a great place, and that while we do, its economic development connections are real and important. So let's talk about that. So we look at our regions. All of the regions are actually growing except North County Central Inland. That's actually shrunk by the smallest of margins. But one of the things, the demographic realities that we need to be aware of, and then when I bring up that unemployment rate of 4.4%, North County has a larger than average young population, 0 to 18, right? We also have a larger than average 65 or 55 and older population. About 50% of our residents fall into those two groups, right? Why is that a problem? It's not a problem. It's a good thing. I think it helps our quality of life. It's nice to have that. But our actual portion of people that are living in their prime working age is relatively low, right? And one of my concerns is with the unemployment rate of 4.4% and these cool industry clusters that are trying to grow and find new talent, they have a relatively small base to work from. So the people that, that are of working age, we need to make sure that they're skilled and they're educated and they're ready to go and really be a part of these industry clusters and really go and have the skills to be able to work for them. We also see some real variation in terms of ability. So if we look at North Central Coast, right? The kind of the southwest portion of North County. 29% of all residents in that North Coast Central region have a graduate or professional degree. In California, 30% of all residents have a 4-year degree or higher. The total number for that is 60%. So the educational attainment levels in that North Coast Central region, North Coast Central Coastal region, very high. Silicon Valley, actually higher than Silicon Valley, like 60% have a 4-year degree or higher. But yet at the other end of the region, right, in that north central inland or north inland region, about 20% of our residents have less than a high school degree as their highest diploma. So within our region, we have areas that have very high educational attainments and areas that have relatively low. And it's not a coincidence that the one has relatively lower educational attainment hasn't seen the job growth and hasn't seen the recovery. There is a relationship there in terms of educational attainment and people's ability to go and find new work and really recover and change from what we've seen in terms of transition. There's lots of cool educational outcomes that we can look at, and if I had more time I would, but I think one that's important and particularly important for the business community, and one that I've talked a lot, is our ability as a region to produce 2-year and 4-year degree in STEM related fields. So for STEM, for science, technology, engineering, math, sometimes it's STEAM, they add art, but those degrees are really important. And one of the good things is so the big takeaway there is we're not producing enough, but we've improved a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. We've gone from producing about 400 or 500 a year up to about 1,200 in the last 5 years. We've kind of doubled our ability. So I think as a region, we need to focus on working with our colleges and our universities to continue to produce more of those STEM degrees within the region. North County is largely higher income than the rest of San Diego County and then California as a whole. So this is important, and the slide is interesting, but one of the things that we're seeing is we're still an export region. We export more of our talent. That first one is kind of the management, business science, and kind of the creative arts occupations. Those tend to be your tier 1 positions. And on the whole, we still export more of those jobs than we hire in our area, right? And if we looked at it, some of them go to Orange County, a lot of them really go right into Sorrento Valley, right? But one of the things I will say is if we look at that number over the last 3 years, every year it shrinks little. So 3 years ago, it was over 100,000 we were exporting outside. Now it's down to last year it was about 92, 93,000. Now it's down to 85. And again, we're transitioning from one that was population serving. So if you were a software developer, you had to go south. Now more and more of those jobs are being created and developed within the region. So it'll be interesting to watch as that portion of our highest skilled, highest educated people, if we still have to send them outside of the region or if they're finding work within North County. So this is one slide that I want to spend just 3 minutes on because it's important. Okay, one of the key things, housing costs. I don't care about housing costs. What I care about is the ability to pay for housing. That's really important. So the ratio of and think of it like this. What's the average wages, the average income that people are getting? There's that relationship to housing. So rather than tell you, oh, housing has gone from point A to point B, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what portion of people's income are they spending on housing? So 50 years ago, food was the metric. How much money did you spend on food, right? That would kind of give us a sense of how poor you were, right? If you were spending over 30% of your money on food, that's not a good thing, right? You were challenged. You probably had some subsistence issues. In this day and age, housing is really the metric that matters, right? Housing is what people spend more. Now, healthcare and some other things are important too, but housing is really the driver. 48%, 48.4 I think is the actual number, of our renters in North County spend over 35% of their income on housing. Okay, so Josh, what does that mean? Is that a lot? Santa Clara County, right? We've talked a lot about Santa Clara. Again, probably one of the more expensive housing markets in the country. Their number for that is 40%. We're 8% higher than one of the most expensive housing markets in the country in terms of the percentage of people that are spending over 30% of the renters on income. For the owner-occupied number, the number's 36. In Santa Clara, it's 32%. So we're higher in Santa Clara in both owner-occupied and renter. If there's not a data point that doesn't give you a sense, we need to figure out what we can do about our workforce housing. That's a good number, and that number has tracked up and gotten worse every single year in the last 3 years. Now let's go back to the commercial and the commercial market. We're continuing to see both the inventory and the average price in commercial and office space going up in North County. Well, how does that work? If supply goes up, isn't the price supposed to go down? Yes, but if the underlying demand is continuing to grow and outpace both of them, then you will see prices go up even while inventory has gone up. And that's been the case in North County for the last 2 or 3 years. So again, that transition from a population serving to a much more export-oriented kind of commercial and industrial component is growing. In the last 36 months, North County has gone from a loose labor market to a tight one. This is important because we like low unemployment, it's a good thing, but we need to switch our emphasis from basically, let's make sure we find a job to everybody, to make sure we are educating and training our people so that they can go into these industry clusters that really are an important part of our economy. Aerospace, and I didn't talk a lot about this, but one of the slides you'll see that's interesting. So Mark brought up the idea, manufacturing is really getting hit in California, hasn't done well. Guess what? North County manufacturing is actually doing pretty well. And manufacturing is doing well because we're not really building anything, but we're designing and developing a lot of those products that are being built. So aerospace and defense, which is an industry cluster we want to think about adding to has really grown in the last 2 to 3 years, and guidance missile systems and like that, and a lot of have done really well. Pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical preparation work has grown, and breweries. I'm sure that surprises no one. Those 3 areas kind of all over the place, right? And that's one of the problems with manufacturing. Manufacturing is really a kind of a hodgepodge, particular area of different areas, but all those are driving growth in manufacturing employment in North County. In the last 5 years, manufacturing has grown 13% in North County. In California, that number is like 2%. So we're growing like 5 to 3 times at the rate that the rest of the state is. Again, this shouldn't be surprising, but it's something we need to be aware of. North County's recovery has not been consistent across all subregions and is somewhat emblematic of the country. You know, there's areas that are doing real well, but there are areas that are still really struggling. And one of the challenges with unemployment is it doesn't factor in underemployment. It doesn't factor in those people that have dropped out of the labor force. And we're seeing that, and some of the data that I'm looking at is showing that in that North Inland region. Proportion of STEM degrees in North County is relatively low, but has improved. And I think, you know, one of the things I want to look at is starting to look at some of those educational outcomes that really connect to kind of our employers' needs and their talent pipelines, and that's something that we'll be looking for at adding in the next year. And we're starting to see some change or churn in our North County's industrial cluster mix. This is something we want to look for and potentially changing some of our industry clusters, and maybe even starting to add some segments underneath things like ICT. You know, cyber is growing. Video gaming is showing, you know, more and more. There's a study that City of Carlsbad that just put out that shows a growing demand for video gaming workers and businesses. Energy, water, and uncertainty within the regional economy. How are we going to deal with the energy and water issues and their close connections moving forward? It's great that we've had a little bit of rain, but it's not, you know, this is going to be something we're going to be talking about, not just next year, but in the next, you know, 24, 36 months and beyond. What are the costs of an increasingly tight labor market, and how as we as a region respond to that? How do we make sure that we're really filling in that talent pipelining and providing the people and the workers that these key clusters need? The housing costs to average wage ratios, this percentage of our income spent on housing, and the ability and that connection to the workforce. You know, all of those things are going to really connect to that quality of life discussion we're about to have. And one of the things we want to spend some more time on, and I'm going to, you know, we'll have some tiers, and we've already developed some ideas, is occupational vulnerability, and looking how our occupations are changing over time, and the implications that has both on education and quality of life in the region. These are all things that we really, kind of the questions that we want to be looking at and asking.